Hola. Alright, so Human Acts by Han Kang. Han Kang. That's her. Can you see that? That's her. Okay. This is the third of her books that I've read, and I have to say that for whatever reason, this one makes, at least for me, a much more powerful and visceral impression. It's not that her other two books are bad by any means. It's just that they kind of left me just a little befuddled or confused about exactly what I was supposed to take away from them. The Vegetarian, which is about a woman who chooses to become a vegetarian and who faces essentially abuse from her husband and from her family, particularly from her father, because of this choice. And then apparently, eventually, by the end of the book, has so far rejected a meat-based diet that she has been put in a sanitarium where she is basically refusing to eat anything. It's a complicated, well, it's a simple story, but has complicated implications. And the same thing, I think, can be said of the other book of hers I have read called Greek Lessons, which I reviewed a few weeks ago. And Greek Lessons is about two people, one of whom is visually impaired to the point of being legally blind, although they can see, some shapes and some colors and some movement. They just have to wear extraordinarily thick glasses, and without their glasses are essentially, helpless because they haven't, really, I guess, lived as blind. So without their glasses, they're helpless. They don't have perhaps the skills that someone blind might have, who also, of course, would be impaired, but might have more coping skills in a sightless world. So it's a relationship between that person who is a teacher of a Korean teacher of Greek, and a young woman who has lost the ability to speak through some probably psychic or mental disturbance of some kind. It's not clear. Perhaps it's got some kind of biological basis within the novel. Maybe it's completely a psychological issue. It's certainly not clear. And those two individuals find love or a connection. I don't really know if love is really the word, but they definitely find some kind of connection. Well, Human Acts, and here I have to say that I don't like the title. This book was originally published in Korean, of course, written and published in Korean. Let me get the year. In 2016 is the English translation. Okay. This was originally published in 2014. And a direct translation of the Korean title is The Boy Is Coming. Okay. And if you think, wow, that's extremely different from Human Acts, you would be right. What this book is essentially about is in 1980, there was a military coup, essentially, in South Korea. And the president of Korea, which is essentially a dictator, was assassinated, and a hand-picked successor of sorts took over. And now this dictator had been very oppressive in various ways, and his successor followed in some of those oppressive ways. And one of the things that he did was he instituted a bit of a military crackdown in a southern city, whose name I would probably slaughter if I tried to pronounce it. And it was a horrific, terrible time. Labor unions and working class organizations, student organizations opposed it, young people opposed it, and did various demonstrations and this kind of thing for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of various kinds. And this was put down pretty brutally by the military, and I'm not sure how many people died. In fact, nobody is entirely sure. It's possibly a massacre, possibly even categorized as something of a genocide of sorts. This is the first I've heard of it. It's a real event. This is not a fictional event by any means. This is a real event, but it is something in the history of Korea that has not been, let's say, loudly talked about outside of Korea, at least not to my knowledge. And so Han Kang tells the story of a young man who starts off by looking for his disappeared, almost certainly killed friend. And he goes to the place where the bodies are stored. And he gets involved in caring for these bodies and categorizing these bodies and helping other people come in and look for their loved ones. And in doing this job, he stays at this location, and there is a certain kind of military crackdown where the military comes. They'd left, and they come back to the city. And in the coming back to the city, in a circumstance which, if it's made completely clear in the book, I did not quite catch it, but somewhere in that military coming back, they shoot and kill this young man. And this tragic story is told in the context of this larger horrific event. But the focus is on the loss of this one individual. And by extrapolation, you can see the loved ones of all of the people who died, all of the individuals. You know, their hopes and their dreams are talked about of both the boy's friend and the boy himself, and those kinds of things. And you hear from his mother, you hear from his other coworkers at this place where he worked with the dead bodies. You hear from his friend, actually, from beyond the grave, which is a kind of a really, really interesting part. And so you hear some of the implications and some of the fallout of this over time. And it really does just bring to bear how much just the death of one person, just the senseless tragic loss of one person has such an impact on people. And you multiply that by 50, when 50 people, or 100 people, or 1,000 people, and that sort of thing. And then you see these tragedies that occur where all we get is these numbers, like, X number of people were executed or died in this uprising or whatever, or, this action, this police action or whatever. And, and we can become very callous to those numbers and to that sense of numbers. But perhaps looking at something like this, we can see that, we can do better. We can do better, perhaps, than to be that callous towards these numbers. Perhaps it's incumbent on all of us to be more concerned, more empathic, more empathetic with other people and the tragedies that they face. And I think that is definitely where Han Kang is going here. And obviously, it's where she's going in Greek lessons, and it's where she's going in the vegetarian as well, in various kinds of ways. I think one of the reasons why this book hit home for me better than the other two is although the other two are realistic in the sense of there's nothing, fantastic, there's no magic realism, there's no unusual, impossible events or anything of that nature. Nonetheless, they seem very much stories on the margin. You have a woman who wants to essentially become a tree in the vegetarian. In Greek lessons, you have two people who have two people whose senses and expression and understanding and ability to express themselves in the world is very damaged. And certainly their stories are more than worthy of being told. But at the same time, it can be a little difficult to grasp what are we supposed to really be seeing here. And in reading Human Acts, it really made me sort of reflect back on those other two and make those other two books so much more powerful in understanding, what Han Kang was trying to get at in those stories. Now, in my defense and in defense of her books, I did kind of get it reading those books in the first place, but it was just made all that much more powerful with Human Acts. And I think that in Korea, Human Acts is the book where a large part of her reputation rests. And I suspect that it is a book like Human Acts that had brought her to the attention of the Nobel Committee as well, who eventually awarded her the prize, because it really is that kind of statement, that kind of universal statement about humanity that I think that people like the Nobel Committee are kind of looking for. At the same time, I think that all three of these books are deeply, deeply, deeply Korean. I think that they're feminist and humanitarian. They are empathic. They're concerned about humanity. They're concerned about our role in society in a way that I think is very, very powerful and rewarding. The books are short, are I guess I should say on the short side, roughly about 200 to 240 pages, that length. But they're nonetheless a little bit difficult to read because they're not. If you're used to a heavily plotted thing where A goes to B goes to C and you get some action sequence, and that's not at all what she's doing. The time sequence may be a little bit skewed in a couple of places. You may be reading a lot of material that, although it is telling a narrative, it isn't telling a ABC kind of plot narrative. It's doing something a little bit different. Human Acts, in fact, is almost like several very closely connected short stories. And there are elements of her other two novels that I've read that have that kind of thing too, where you get different narrators for different sections and that kind of thing. So I think that multivocal kind of approach is also something that she's clearly interested in. And that's why, like I said, I'm not a big fan of the title Human Acts. Now, Human Acts is definitely a more universal kind of name than The Boy Is Coming, but I think The Boy Is Coming really brings to home what's going on here, really focusing on that young man and the promise of his life that was cut short because of these larger political issues, which were completely and 100% in every way, shape, and form irrelevant. Okay, that's the important thing. Just completely irrelevant. And one of the ways that Han Kang makes that really clear is she provides almost no background about the politics. almost no discussion of the rights and the wrongs and the goods and the bads and the ups and the downs and the thises and the that's of the politics. Because that's not the point. The point is the senseless, brutal death of this young boy and other individuals who are caught up in these events, such as this whatever political power struggle, whatever was going on, and the ways in which these larger forces impact individuals. And that's the same thing with the vegetarian. You know, she did not want to become involved in the politics of meat eating and not meat eating. She did not want to become involved in, this feminist kind of challenge to a patriarchal norm. But she's got caught up in that narrative, the character in that novel, I mean. And the same thing in Greek lessons, which is a more cerebral kind of approach about, these two characters, they're just seeking to live their life. They're just seeking different kinds of fulfillment. One of them enjoys teaching, and as long as they have enough vision to do it, they want to keep teaching. The other one is trying to recover some kind of sense of language, and she can't speak Korean. She's losing her son. She's losing, some of her family and some of the people she cares about because she can't communicate with them effectively, and she's trying to get some kind of language back, and so she's seeking that in Greek. And it deals in a very abstract way with how language constructs meaning. It's a definitely more cerebral and abstract than the other two books. But all three books are doing the same kind of thing about how these larger pressures are impacting people's lives and delimiting their choices and causing tragedy to enter their lives where tragedy doesn't need to be. All right, so for what it's worth, that is Han Kang. I recommend her highly. At this point, I would say that wherever you start, try to read all three of these books. Whichever one appeals to you first, start there. I don't think there is a wrong choice there, but I think that read all three of them because I think all three of them really expand each other and really work against each other and with each other. I don't know if her other novels are available in English. I have not checked recently. But if I do find any more, I will definitely be reading them, and they will show up here eventually. And if you have read her and want to comment, please, I'd love to hear what you have to say. If you have some thoughts about what I've said, please let me know. And hey, like, subscribe, and all those YouTube things. See you next time.